So this is ARCH620 Pro Practice in the MARC program. There are we have 13 students, and as you can see, we meet in person, relatively distanced and masked and things like that, doing our best to stay safe and healthy and all of that. But right here downtown, and everybody, or just outside of downtown, and I guess everybody here has an undergrad degree and they're pursuing their MARC. And what I have done, and it's a good thing that they're all wearing masks because you may see some bad facial expressions, but what I've done is assign them a project for the semester. And I gave them the option to do it alone, do it in teams, etc. But basically, they have to come up with a business idea. It can be an architecture firm. It can be an app. I don't care what it is. Come up with an idea, put a plan together, and pitch it in our own Shark Tank style final at the end of the semester. And so a lot of the conversations that we're having are with professionals. I guess most everybody's been inside the profession, but they don't have to be. You don't have to be inside the profession, but we're really trying to learn what it takes to start a business, plan a business, start a business, run a business, really understand what it means to be a part of the business of architecture. And so tonight, Alejandra, who I know you know, she said, "Hey, can we get Wil to talk to us?" I said, "Yeah, I actually happen to know Wil," and I know she knows you.
Yeah, so excellent. I'm glad she did that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to turn it over to her and the rest of the folks on her team. And this is their show. I always tell them to learn whatever it is that they want to learn from our speaker. So ask the questions necessary to learn what they want to learn from Wil Marquez.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Right, go ahead.
Alrighty. Well, this is Wil Marquez, Northwest Indiana native. Wil graduated from the University of Minnesota with a bachelor's degree in architecture, and from University of Michigan with a master's in architecture. In 2009, he founded the consulting company wPurpose. wPurpose is a creative design studio curious about our built environment and its future. Its focus and capabilities lie in delivering urban and public design services. Their bring people to design portfolio includes city bus stops, affordable housing redevelopment, retail design, public park policies and illustrations, creative branding, and art project management. And Wil has been my mentor for a couple of years, and I used to work at his studio.
Perfect.
Thank you. We came up with, so we're gonna kind of go for and ask those questions. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. But I can hear you.
Okay.
You may want to move closer when it's your turn to ask questions, so you can hear a little bit better. So the microphone is on the laptop.
Yeah, can you ask any questions? Okay. I'm talking, so you can see who I am. I guess the first question we'd like to ask you is, how did you make your first sale and or service? So can you kind of talk about that experience maybe and how you kind of did it?
That's a great question. How did I make my first sale? I think I'm going to be very honest with you. I think my first major sale. I'm going to tell you two stories because they kind of ran side by side. My first sales was actually with the city market, and they're in downtown Indianapolis, and they were building a bar called Tomlinson Tap Room. How many of you guys been to Tomlinson? Nobody. Oh, well, good. Some people have been to Tomlinson. And so they needed someone to come up with a creative solution for their tables that are in there. And it was at a time when Indianapolis and reclaimed furniture was becoming, really, it was starting, there was, it was getting an inkling of sort of popularity. But during that time, I would drive out to farms out in northern and southern and just all around the state, looking for places that would, were tearing down barns, or deconstructing old high schools. And I came upon a place that, that did that type of work. They were a specialty demolition company that took down old Indiana architectures and, took the brick, took the stone, took the wood, and all those tables over there come from a very interesting species of red pine, and we put them at the city market. That was our first project.
What kind of project has wPurpose managed besides those creative bar tables, and what was the key to a successful project management?
Well, the first successful thing to any project management is being able to deliver the goods. And so, there could be a million creative ideas, but if you don't have the resources and you don't have the hustle to make it happen on time, and it has to be, it has to be creative. I think the only reason why that happened was, we were all, there was a group of us, there was a group of artists that are now becoming business people, artists, architects. There was a guy in town named Nick Allman. Is anybody familiar with Nick Allman? Jeff, are you there?
I'm familiar.
Jeff, do you know Nick Allman?
I do, yeah.
Okay. So, these were guys that were excellent fabricators. They were young. They were just getting out of grad. I think he was just getting out of maybe some grad school. And even myself, I was still pretty young. I must have been about 30 years old. But all of us were sort of entering into this very creative space. And being able to deliver on the goods and call on people to get projects done. Well, Nick was one of those guys. Once I got a handle on this wood, Nick and Project One, Kyle, those guys were all involved in getting small projects done around the city. And the city market up in Tomlinson Tap Room was one of those projects. And the reason why, again, it was successful is because we delivered a project that was interesting. It was at the cutting edge, not the cutting edge, but it was a trend that was coming into the city was reclaimed wood. And so all of us sort of collaborated, right? No, there was zero egos, except for the goal was to deliver Stevie in the city market in Tomlinson Tap Room, this awesome bar. Like that was the goal. And we were all pretty young. So, our fees were awesome and, we delivered it. So, actually, there's a routed map of the state of Indiana, and that was done by Kyle from Project One, and that was one of our very first collaborations together. And we were all, now we're all business people, and that must have been 10 something years ago, 2012. So, I think one of the successes of my type of business is the management, is being able to be organized. I feel like today I maybe work in more Excel sheets, managing furniture, doing budgets. I think it's the type of work for where I'm at in my life where people can really trust me to get things done. I would have never gotten to that trusted space without being able to manage the design. And that is to say that you could have a very creative idea, but can you make it? Can you get it done? And early on, at Ball State University, I was a research fellow at the Institute for Digital Fabrication with Kevin Klinger and a whole bunch of other wacky guys out there. And we were all about not just talking about architecture, but the idea is how do you make things happen, like get things done. And it was, and so we were thinking about a lot of things, but we were also making them. And that was the key to starting the business and eventually growing into management. But first you gotta master the craft. And once you master the craft of either architecture or making things or of corralling clients or of doing good marketing, once you master the craft, then people respect you. You know, it's like Bruce Lee, you know, it's just like you respect the master in this game. But then the game changes really into a management game where really you're being paid top dollar to help manage very important projects. At least that's what I'm doing at this point in my life. So it is about design, and maybe I'll team up with people who are younger. I'll give opportunities to other people, but at this point I try to bring the projects in and I do my best to try to manage them, make the design happen, and take a fee and get to the next project. That's a great question, by the way, Alejandra.
Your studio often gets very non-traditional projects. Your studio often gets very non-traditional projects. Can you tell us a little bit about how you manage those? And I guess what I'm trying to say is like, they're so different. They're not like, you get old McDonald's.
Right.
How do you manage?
Right.
How do you manage them, or how do you manage the writing?
So if I was going to explain, like sort of give you a glimpse into my business model, it's a model that ultimately, because of this pandemic, has worked out for someone like me. And I think a long time ago, someone would have said, well, how is Wil working out of a maker space and making his practice work? How is he doing this? And the answer is remaining flexible. My model has has allowed me to align myself with academia. It's allowed me to make good friends with professors within academia at multiple universities. And it also began to give me access to young talent. I would get a call and they would say, hey, we have some students, and before maybe they go to, maybe some of the downtown firms, they should start off with you, Wil. And we would come upon some very interesting projects. But, design is complex and it needs, it's nuanced. And so it's not a black and white thing. And you have to be very good at solving those types of problems. So it is about creativity, of course. That's the hook, is telling people all the time that, you're going to solve their problem with design. And then getting the right team together and staying flexible. So for example, I came upon a project in Wilmington, Delaware, just through some word of mouth. The public library in Wilmington, Delaware called me up and said, hey, we're going to get rid of all of our furniture. And we heard that you're the guy that can help us manage this project. I'm all the way in Detroit, you know what I mean? And so I'm just like, okay, so who do I got to get together? It's just myself. It's this type of scale project. Who do I know within my wheelhouse that I can assemble a flexible team? We don't need to be together virtually. And, everyone's going to make some money. We're going to service the client. We're going to meet the deadlines. And, a project's going to get executed. And then I know for sure that once I hit all those marks, they will call on me again. And so I've had success in having projects outside the city of Indianapolis. Like I was talking with Jeff about earlier, you have to do a really good job at building social capital. Part of that starts with where you're at right now, getting to know your colleagues. Don't have this sort of mentality that once you leave the institution that you should not keep in touch with each other. You should become more friendly. And in fact, those might be some of the first people that you guys are going to build relationships with or partner up with or take a risk on. And so, I've gotten to this very interesting spot where I've just been able to stay super flexible and I think stay ahead of the trends. In some way I backed into it, in another way it was like utopic perfect timing. So being able to work virtually has already been something that Alejandro understands. We've already been doing it, ain't it? Like, we were having Zoom calls with clients in Evansville, Indiana, 2 years before most of the public was even talking about Zoom. And in fact, I remember doing one of the first virtual video calls with Ball State University. I was an adjunct, and we did it out of the Ball State Center in downtown in 2008, 2007. So think about that. That's 13 years ago. Ball State had already been testing what it would take to give classes virtually. And today we're just really doing that. So I feel like being part of academia and really staying in touch with that world has really kept me young. It's kept the office always interesting, and it's allowed me to build a really good academic network. So if there's those of you that really want to get into academia, it could be a really awesome place to start a career. Does that kind of answer the question a little bit? I kind of went in a multiple tangents, but it's this sort of how you get to this place is really complex. But I would say for sure that a staple of that is academia. So real quick, just before maybe you guys go on or have any questions, this idea of just sort of building these small micro teams of talented individuals, does that seem like an odd idea to everybody, or are there people that are there in the classroom that are working that way now? Maybe you're doing a competition together from far. Is anybody working collaboratively in this way? Well, you will. I promise you.
Well, Will, I think one of the things that's interesting to me, right? This is the professor talking, but when I presented this idea of you've got to do this project this semester, and I literally came in first class or second class, whatever it was, and said, you're going to do this project. You can do it alone. You can form a team, or you can lobby the entire class to do one big project. And so right now, I would, off the top of my head, are we split almost evenly with people that are going it alone and people on teams? And I know, some of you have known each other before, and some of you didn't know each other until you met when you got here. So there's that dynamic, certainly. But I think it is interesting the number of small teams that they've created to collaborate on the project.
Yep.
And you would probably be interested in this. We're working through an agile design strategy. And I don't know if you know Marty Neumeier. He's a branding guy. He's a luminary in the branding world. But there's I think it's his most recent. He wrote this book called Scramble. And he did it it's a business case scenario, but he did it in story form, right? So it's this fictional story about the CEO, who happens to be an architect, by the way. But he's got to solve these business problems, and they use these agile strategy. And so that's what we're going through right now to get to the end game, to get to the Shark Tank episode that we're going to have at the end of the semester. And what we did tonight was we paired up teams to challenge each other's thinking, to make each other's thought process, responses, answers stronger. We'll keep doing that over the next 4 or 5 weeks. So we're going through this continual iteration and changing up the scenario every week to make sure that the idea that we present at the end to the panel is the strongest idea possible, because it's going to be pretty realistic. You said something earlier. You said something that really triggered me. They're going to be presenting their business plans, their business ideas to a group of people, and that group of people, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather up a bunch of VCs, basically. So realistically, it could be someone that could invest in a project, right? But they're gonna ask a lot of tough questions, right? I know what you were talking about, being able to deliver. It's one thing to have a great idea for your business, but you've got to be able to execute on it, right? And so if we play that scenario out that Wil is talking about, great creative design, but Wil and his team have put together this great design, but if they can't deliver it, it's a failure, right? It doesn't matter how well it's designed. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is. It doesn't matter how creative it is. If it's never delivered, or if it's not on time, not on budget, all those things, it's a failure. And what's going to happen is when you go and present your idea to the sharks, they're going to say, you know what, that's a really fantastic idea. How are you going to deliver that, right? How are you going to execute on that? Whether it's an app or whether it's a design firm, whatever your idea is that you're coming up with, that's going to be one of the main questions is, how do you take it from, the same as all academia, right? It's just ideas. How do you take it from there and bring it into reality? And so I love the fact that you were talking about that. Of course, that's sort of the topic, but that's the reality that all of this is based on.
Yeah. So no matter what you guys decide to do with this pitch, you got to lean in on what the hustle is, what's the hook, and there's a lot of directions that this can go. So, I'll give you a good example. I was talking with my boy Kalpesh the other day, and he sent me a text, and he's like, "Hey, I'm about to get my backyard done with this app. It's like a landscape app, right? You take a picture of your backyard, it goes to some tech firm in San Francisco, and then all of a sudden it's going to kick you out a landscape plan, and great idea, right? Perfect. So my guy Kalpesh, he's out there, and that's what everybody does out there. They order their food from an app. They do everything, including your landscape. So he calls me, and I sent him a text back some months later, and I said, Kalpesh, how is your backyard? And then it went blank. So I called him, and he says, man, I'm going to tell you what happened. Ultimately, we needed to meet face to face. We're spending a lot of money as business owners, and we had a hard time getting a hold of these people, right? And so for those of you that were thinking about this real slick app, that was the major fail of the whole thing. But I think that's where the sort of one-on-one, like this is where maybe you can step in. I think that's where the start of another business plan, happens. How do you reach consumers and really connect with them one-on-one? Because they're making a very personal choice about their space. And so, I think really when you're buying something at that scale and at that money, the things that architects and designers, when you're selling something for $20,000 or $60,000 or a home rent, whatever it is, it's very personal to somebody. And I feel like it's more personal at that level than it is at higher levels, You know, when your budgets get into the hundreds of thousands, I don't feel like it's as personal really as the $20,000 or $30,000. So, you know, as you guys think about how you want to connect as designers with your public. So if you want to do that in isolation, that's great. That has limitations and it has advantages. If you want to connect real closely with communities and bring, you know, a nonprofit that's going to, you know, save communities by offering them development services, right? You're going to be a manager who brings a design team together to save communities. All right. You know, there's a lot of ways that this can go. But I'm curious to sort of, you know, maybe if there's some questions, and if I can help a little bit closer, Jeff, you know what I mean? I don't want to spend the whole time here talking a little bit too crazy.
Well, what other questions do you guys have?
I know a lot of them he's kind of already answered, but maybe one would be, for me, would be, how do you get communities to do the work? So I know we've kind of been talking about how you do the work and how you manage the work, but I know community involvement and getting the public involved is a big part.
Yep.
So how do you do that?
So that's a great question. So over here on this other phone, the lady that you guys were hearing, I go to a church in downtown Detroit that is right across from Tiger Stadium. And because I'm part of the church and because I have a design background, I inserted myself on the sort of committee for development. So right now, it's a church that is losing money, and we are thinking about how we can develop a property or use our land as a church to develop something. And so what we're talking about here, just to answer your question, how do you get people motivated about doing something or making change? It starts with the vision. Like, if people generally, you guys all have a gift. The gift that you guys have is that you are able to look into the future. Other people don't do that. And so that service alone is valuable, super valuable. And so you can give it to your church and you can give it to a client, but I guarantee you, and I promise you, whether you're a licensed professional or a non-licensed professional, you can make money and have a career selling that future telling, okay? And whether that's a floor plan or a beautiful piece of artwork, someone is willing to pay hourly for that talent. I've gotten more people, and I think Alejandra knows, if you can help them paint the picture by listening to their dreams and listening to their ideas, and I'm not just saying listening. This church conversation, the pastor started off by saying, we're happy to have this development team and their designers. They're listening to us. That's exactly what she just finished saying. I was listening before you guys got on. And she's like, we're happy to have a development team here that's going to help us develop our church property, and they're listening to us. They didn't come in here and try to stuff this design down our throat. And I was like, wow, could you imagine that some architecture office with a bunch of suits went into this church and tried to bulldog these? And so guess what? They didn't do anything. In fact, it worked against them. They were so turned off by that now they're advocating for a different level of sort of design advocacy and design change agents that are going to come in and help them. The team consists of developers, architects, some, just creative designers, community people, and it has now changed the whole church dynamic. And I'm talking about a major piece of property, one across from Tiger Stadium in downtown Detroit. So if you don't think you can make a difference, you just got to get involved. And if you're going to be the bearer of future telling, then, whether it's at your church or your neighborhood association or at the university or in a collaboration with somebody, like you gotta give your all, and you gotta help people see the future. And once they see it, they'll follow you. And I think that's the difference between a lot of successful architects and those that are not so successful, is that they may be really good at showing the vision and telling the future, but no one is going to listen to them because they don't know how to connect, right? Other architects are really good with meeting with community and really bringing a lot of people along, but maybe their vision is not so strong, right? So I think in life, as you guys all get older, you're going to find that it takes a lot of different people to come together. Maybe this gets back to your business model. If you can team together and highlight how everyone becomes an expert and you deliver a service with a group of experts, that could be a very successful business. There's a company called Pentagram. How many of you guys have heard of Pentagram? Pentagram, again, is a collaborative office. I think over 30, 40, these people have been around for a long time, ain't it, Jeff?
Yeah, I'd say probably 30 or 40 years is probably about right.
Yeah, this was an office that really, again, wanted to turn design on its head. They have a principle in art, a principle in architecture, a principle in all these disciplines, and they're non-traditional. They're not like things that you would typically find, but they make it work. Everyone's responsible, but the key, the North Star is like design, you know? So it works. Okay, I went off on a tangent there. All right, but good question, by the way. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, for sure. Another one, you kind of mentioned it a little bit too, I think, because you said staying flexible and staying ahead of trends. But kind of the question of the year that I know we've been asked a lot in studio, and I'm sure you've been asked a lot, is how are you dealing with COVID, since many of our designs deal with how people interact with space and interact with other people. So is there anything else you can kind of add on that as well?
Yeah, I've been thinking, so I'm going to say this real quick. I don't know if it's me or my age, maybe Jeff can understand it, maybe because we're a little bit older, but about every 10 years, I feel like there's something that happens in the universe that makes architects have to really look inward at themselves and think about how and what they're going to do for the next 10 years. And in my personal journey, that happened with 9/11, right? I was working at an office, and then 9/11 happened. And then 10 years later, the economy crashed, and everybody had to get out of Dubai quick. You know what I mean? And I can tell you that's exactly so. Like my life ended in another firm when the economy crashed in 2010. And then 10 years later in 2020, now we're in this pandemic. So if you are not able to transform yourself about every 10 years as a design professional into the next thing, your story is going to get old really quick. And so, educating yourself, continuous learning, meeting personal goals, taking big risks. I think that's one thing that's sort of, I've never shied away from taking on any project. I have literally no fear. Because when you go through trauma, like I think that we all have, especially like at the downturn of when the towers fell down, that was trauma. Could you guys imagine being in an office? I was working at Ratio Architects, and all of a sudden trauma happened. People lost their jobs. But at the end of it, what the beautiful thing was, what shakes out of it is like a new series of crazy architect people that are now doing this interesting work in Indianapolis. That's what comes out of it, right? Like something else, because of that trauma, something else happened. And so you're going to sit, as young professionals, you'll be asked to sit somewhere in there. And here we are today. but I promise you, I have not been busier. Honest, this is the busiest I've ever been. And I got projects going on in South Bend, Wilmington, Delaware. I just got done with an estimate on a new kitchen restaurant here in Detroit on a very popular corridor. I bought a land bank house that I'm transforming with my wife. You know, there's a lot of ways to work in design, you know, and it's like, it's, you know, this is my year, even though it's a pandemic. So I'm blessed. Maybe to tell you, you know, not everybody has it, but I'm telling you that I'm blessed by design.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
It's a lot. I'm sorry if it's a lot, but you know, if you're going to start this business, you got to take it serious. And in 2010, when I decided to do this, I took it super serious. And just last year, I developed a Excel sheet where I listed all my business. And I not only listed it by business, but I also took the time to sort of say I looked at all my invoices and I listed what did I do. And about 60% of my work is project management. That's what I learned about my business by doing that Excel sheet over 10 years, Jeff. And it accounted for a good majority of how I made money. The second thing that I made a lot of money, or when you break out like your invoices over 10 years, you start to learn a lot about how you really make money and the services you really offer. And what's nice about when I looked at my pie chart was there's a good portion of technical work, right? The technical skill that you guys are learning in Revit or, you know, drawing or landscape, whatever it is that your technical skill is, that will save your life. You can always make money doing that. Then it's like project management is a good piece of the pie. Model making, I make money off of. Like all these very interesting ways to make money in architecture. And I'll be honest, I'm not licensed. I've taken the test. I moved, you know, I've been loyal to the profession in a lot of ways for many, many years, but I'm not licensed. But I've managed to just be very good, and I can demand, you know, some pretty good hourly rates to simply be a great design project manager. If you really wanted to put it in a, you know, sort of square. And I have ultimate flexibility. So that's the other part is flexibility there too, Jeff, is, you know, that all that can happen. It's all possible in today's world around COVID.
You know, I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you went to that effort with the spreadsheet, because it's, as you're saying that, it's really interesting to me the number of firms that I consult with that have really never gone to that kind of effort. They have in their head how they're making money. They have in their head, you know, all of these things, but they've never really taken that historical perspective, which is what you're talking about, over 10 years, right?
Right.
And what's really important about that, I think, is that they never ask themselves, and then by extension, they've never asked their clients what those clients actually value the most in what they do. And that's critically important when, you know, hey, we're going to have this architecture firm, or we're going to design these things, and we're going to do this and provide the service and do that, and construction administration, whatever. But if you do something like what Will is talking about, and suddenly you realize, you know what, we're doing all this work, and we're good at it, and people are seeking us out, and we're getting paid to do it. But what they really value and what we do is this sliver. You know, it's
right.
This aspect of the services. When you can do that kind of effort, that gives you all kinds of freedom to go, you know what? What if we double down or triple down on that service line? Because that's what our clients are actually valuing out of everything that we offer is that. And you want to talk about the business of architecture, when you start to understand some of those things, you're going to have a much more profitable firm. You're going to have a much more sustainable firm. You're going to be, if you can build a brand around that, then suddenly you're the go-to firm for that. Where most firms out there are just, we do everything, and we hope people will come to us to do some of this. There's a lot of power in what you're talking about there.
Yeah, just today, Jeff, again, I got a call from South Bend, Indiana, from the Department of Metropolitan Development and Planning, and they got a corridor, which is a minority corridor. And again, my name throughout the state has gone around, but they basically said, hey, we heard that you might be able to help us. How do we get on a Zoom call? And, we'd like to hear how you're working and how you can help us solve a problem with our neighborhood and our corridor. Perfect. It's really, again, it's that report really helped me. And the only reason why I did it is because I got hit by a car and I broke my leg. So, I had nothing to do. And I was like, let me get to this. This is something I've always wanted to do. I had nothing but time. So that's what I did. And honestly, it has given me a ton of insight, and all the things you're saying are correct, Jeff. A lot of people do not take the time with their business to really understand. And the whole time, really, even up to this day, I feel like I'm selling design, but you're not really selling design. Design is already baked in. You know what I mean? What you're selling is the relationship, right? They want to do business with you. They called you. And so, and then the second thing is they trust you, right? We haven't even talked about design. I said they like you. Then I said they trust you, right? No one's talking about design yet. That's what you're selling. You're selling yourself, and you're selling that you're capable and trustworthy. Those are all important things that you can bring the magic. And then really it's about the management side. And I talk to students all the time, and I say, when you guys do these presentations and you get up there, you have to go into character. I always sort of say, you got to go into character. And then you got to go in and you have to sell, And my former boss, actually, Vop Osili, always used to say, Will, fake it till you make it. That's what he always used to say that. You got to go into character and really make that sale. And when you do it over 1 trillion times, it really becomes really becomes fairly natural. People become comfortable with you. But yeah, the design is baked in. You're offering something way more dynamic. Everyone should know that.
Do you guys have any other questions? Let me throw this out there, because we do have a couple of projects that are I'm going to call them community focused or community based projects, which is Will's sweet spot. So those of you that are contemplating a project that's in that realm, do you have any specific questions for Will? What about, we're thinking about this, what would you suggest? There's a chance for you to get sort of a little guest juror action going on if you're interested.
Yeah, happy to look at it or talk about it.
I'm putting you on the spot, I know. No? All right, well, while they're thinking about it, and maybe going, man, I wish you wouldn't have said that.
Well, maybe give me an idea of what the project was about. Are they being coy?
Well, okay, so let me generalize it. There are a lot of communities that have, well, I mean, South Bend, you talked about South Bend. How much blight is there in South Bend, right? How many, outside of Notre Dame and downtown South Bend, seems to be in a little bit of a resurgence, I suppose. How many abandoned buildings, how much blight, how many social issues that need attention. What about the idea of somehow going to communities and connecting with stakeholders to do something with those buildings, do something positive with those buildings, whether it's simply redevelop it, whether it's use it somehow to address some sort of social need. What have you ever seen? What have you ever done in that realm? What suggestions do you have for that?
Okay, I'll talk real quick just about a graduate school project when I was at the University of Michigan, and there's a city called Flint that most of you may be familiar with. They got a water issue. Before that water issue, though, Flint was still pretty depopulated and pretty deflated. And so what we did was our professor worked with a group of investors called the Divine Nine or something, but it was a group of business owners that own the majority of the buildings in downtown Flint. And so the idea was to bring these graduate students, and each of us get to take a building and sort of make something happen, almost like a spectacle, And so this was a very interesting project for architects, because I'm expecting that we're going to go to Flint and do a building. But instead of that, we're doing something that is about caring about a building. And not only that, but could we imagine doing something that is about architecture, but is about the space between architecture? And when I mean that, I don't mean like the street. I mean, when I talk about the space between buildings, it's like there's an empathetic world of architecture that is about a building, but it's about the things that make buildings good, and that's people. So when I talk about the space between buildings, it is about the street, and it is about landscape, but it's really about people. But people don't think about that. They think that I'm talking about this other thing, but it's really about connecting with people. Okay? So, on a project in Flint, what we did is we occupied the building, and I imagined a barber shop. One of the sort of oldest socially constructed, not by architects, but it's designed, it's socially constructed. Do you guys know what that means, to have a architecture that is socially constructed? It means that it's designed by its inhabitants. If you usually go to barbershops, the best ones are really made by all the people that go there over the years and years and years and years and years, and you sort of get to understand that space is designed and for the community, right? But architects, you're not hearing too many architects out there that are like, hey, I really designed this really bad barbershop. It's because that type of project may not make any money, but it's the most important architecture in a community, right? So everybody in the class was challenged to think about how these buildings could connect at that level. Is everybody understanding me? Perfect. And then we were going to have a big event where the spectacle was then going to invite the public to come and participate in these architectures. Okay, each of these abandoned buildings. So one was like at a theater, one was, and that really opened my mind. It opened my mind in a way where I was like, wow, this is so cool. The press came out, The whole community was excited. The news was there. And my project was about a barbershop, but it was more than a barbershop. A project like that can really get people to connect. Remember I had told you about this idea of showmanship when you're trying to connect with somebody in a community, it's an emotional sell, right, Jeff? Even when you buy a house or you do a renovation, what you're selling is very emotional because it's a lot of money. But in this case, it wasn't even about a lot of money. It was about how can you connect with the community that really cares about where they live. And so I went to the newspaper and I said, hey, could you guys pull me as many images that you can about Lansing or Flint, Michigan sports, like from 30 years ago. So they gave me a trove of all these images from Mateen Cleaves, all these, old players that used to be in, that you came from Flint, Michigan. Jim Abbott only has one arm. He was a pitcher. He came from Flint. I had all this collection of images. And when I put them inside this old abandoned building, people got super emotional. So here's an architect, nothing about brick, nothing about mortar. This was a photo montage about where they lived. And those types of projects connect with people emotionally. They left there wanting to make change. Where do I sign up? I think people generally are hungry for change. They want to do something, but who's going to lead them? And I think this is where architecture, at least for me, I found a spot in there to say, I can help lead. And I will find others at universities and other professionals who might want to say, I also want to lead. And that's how you make change right there. That's the moment. So sometimes it's not building something. You have to dig deeper.
That's great. I think that's a good lesson for the teams that are contemplating those types of projects. That it's we've talked about stakeholders, we've talked about issues that you're trying to solve, but that buy-in, right, and getting everybody rallied around, and that's that emotional part. You can't rally people around anything if they don't have any emotional buy-in to it, if they don't have any emotional connection to it. So if you're thinking about a project like that, think about how you're going to like Will said, think about how you're going to lead the stakeholders, because no matter what you're trying to do, in my experience, if you're going into a place to do some good, you're not going to get anywhere without the buy-in of the stakeholders, right? You're the outsider. You can generate that emotion, you can do that, you can lead them, but you've got to have them. You got to have them there.
Very true.
We've just got a couple more minutes of Will's time. Any final questions for him? Will, I really appreciate you. Appreciate you spending this time with us.
Thank you.
Stay safe in Detroit. Good luck on the development project. Better luck next year, Tigers.
I know. I keep wanting to interject in the meeting and say, hey, look, I don't know that we need a building. I keep wanting to suggest, that hexagon thing, the beehive in New York.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to suggest that they should pitch the sort of beehive thing, like an installation where people can go up to the top and look into Tiger Stadium, but because they lose so much, it'd be a worthless installation. So I'm scrapping the whole thought.
Yeah, you might want to move it over to the Red Wings side.
That'd probably be an easier sell, that's for sure. Thank you, everybody, and good luck. If you guys ever have any questions, Alejandra has my information, and good luck to all of you and to your projects. And actually, Jeff, is there a sort of final end to the Shark Tank thing, or is there a presentation that you can invite me back to?
yeah, we're going to, I don't remember the date exactly. It's like December 14th or something like that. We will we'll have our presentation. So I will let you know.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
My biggest takeaway from today was that a lot of people think architecture is just about the building, but if we think about ourselves as problem solvers for the people who interact with the building both inside and out, then we can develop a lot of creative design ideas from that.
I liked that as you progress in a career, you start to become a good manager and start to gain trust and respect for delivering unique and creative projects on time. And then he mentioned that he likes to get the right team together that's able to be flexible and be able to complete those projects.
My takeaway this week was, as designers, we like to think about making things, and that he pointed out that it's important that we actually make things, and delivering the goods on a project is very important, and I think that is something that can actually create a lot of value for us as designers is following through with that.